So Paul Manafort, who was Trump's campaign manager, has accepted a plea deal from Mueller for crimes that he committed and agreed to help work with Mueller as part of this plea deal. If you remember, Manafort was convicted a couple weeks ago of the first round of crimes he was charged with, and now he's pled guilty to some more crimes, and part of his agreement to get a lesser sentence will be to work with Mueller in his investigation. Now, this is going to be significant for a couple of reasons. First is this could be bad for Trump, and it could be bad for other people. It could be bad for Trump because if Trump committed some crime and Mueller knows of it, and Manafort knows of it, then he'll now be cooperating with Mueller to find evidence of that crime. However, if you read the original indictment of Manafort, it talks about how, I think it was 2012, 2013, around then, he was operating as a foreign lobbyist for pro-Russian interest in the Ukraine. And he was doing that with Group A and Group B. Group A and Group B are groups called Mercury, LLC, and the Podesta Group. Now, Podesta, that might sound familiar to you. That's because Hillary's campaign manager was a man by the name of John Podesta. John Podesta founded the Podesta Group with his brother, Tony Podesta. And so even though John's no longer with the Podesta Group, that Tony Podesta, who is with the Podesta Group, I know it's a mouthful, right? Basically, he still was working with Hillary as far as like doing campaign contributions, doing fundraisers, things of that nature, and is connected to Hillary. If you read what was really going on in 2012 and 2013, and this is what part of what Manafort's been convicted for, is they were lobbying for this pro-Russian president in Ukraine, and they were lobbying all sorts of people, such as senators, people connected to the White House, and things of that nature. And this is something that's been going on in Washington for a long, long time, and it does need to stop. I don't care if it brings Trump down with it. It is ridiculous to know how much power lobbyists have, particularly lobbyists for foreign governments. They give all kinds of goods, money to these groups, these lobbyist groups, people like the Podesta Group, Mercury LLC, and Manafort, and they then convince our politicians to do the bidding of these foreign governments who have their own interest at heart, which is a terrible thing. Meanwhile, me and you, the average citizen, we have no idea who's paying who, what our Congress people are voting, why we know what they're voting, but we don't know why, who they've met with, and things of that nature. We keep talking about foreign influence, acting like it's just Russia, but it's not. It's Russia, it's China, it's Israel, it's France, it's the UK. It's pretty much every country has these people that are lobbying for them, and it's successful. Now, it's important to note that nothing Manafort's been charged with or pled guilty to involves the election in 2016 or any connection with Trump whatsoever. In fact, the failing to register as a foreign lobbyist, this all stemmed from 2012, 2013, and some of the people that were being lobbied were connected to Obama's White House and were connected to people like the Secretary of State at the time by the name of Hillary Clinton. So these lobbyists, now there's a good chance that Mueller will be able to investigate what Manafort knew about this, who was being contacted. I hope that he does get to the bottom of it. I hope that not just the people that didn't register as foreign lobbyists, but also the politicians that were discussing things with these lobbyists also have to answer questions. We need more transparency and need to know who these people are talking to from foreign governments and things of that nature. However, the second thing to remember is, as much as I would like to see these people go down, and maybe you're thinking, great, I hope Manafort works with Mueller and brings Trump down. That's great. As much as we want to believe that, remember, Manafort is a shady character, and he is someone who's looking at spending the rest of his life in prison. I believe he's 69, so even a 10-year sentence could be like the majority of the rest of his life. So he does have an incentive to sing like a songbird, and sometimes that doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. So just because whether Manafort comes out and says, yeah, Trump's guilty of this, or he comes out and says the Podesta Group's guilty of this, and I lobbied Hillary Clinton, it doesn't matter. We need more than just his word, because this is clearly someone at this point that has a lot to lose by not cooperating. So maybe the only thing he has to offer up is basically telling exaggerated stories to try to get himself off the hook, to get some bigger players on the hook. So again, it could be a big story, and it's something that's definitely worth looking out for. Now, I've been skeptical from the get-go with the charges of Manafort, because particularly the charge of failing to register as a foreign lobbyist, I find that dubious. Not because he's not guilty of it. He probably is guilty of it and should be charged with it. But the fact that so many people do this in Washington, Mercury and the Podesta Group would be two of the groups. By the way, I mentioned who the Podesta Group was. Mercury LLC is kind of the Republican version of that. So no side's innocent in this. Don't get me wrong. They're just basically like the Podesta Group. They're lobbying for foreign interests, except they're basically doing it to Republicans, while the Podesta Group's basically doing it to Democrats. I mean, it's just the entire establishment, politicians on both sides, and just the whole system is unbelievably corrupt. And that's the real story here, that there is this corruption that goes along on both sides. So on one hand, it's nice to see that someone's actually getting charged for these crimes. On the other hand, it seems awfully suspicious to me that, again, we see people getting charged and it's only people connected to Trump, right? Like, for example, we know for a fact that both Mercury LLC and the Podesta Group also failed to register as foreign lobbyists. It said so in the charge, the indictment of Manafort. Yet, the Podesta Group was allowed to retroactively file in 2016, I believe. So basically, the FBI went to Manafort and, through the Mueller investigation, said, hey, guess what? You're guilty of this. We're charging you with this crime. And then they go to Podesta and go, hey, guess what? You're guilty of this. No big deal. Just fill out some paperwork and we'll let you slide. Now, maybe that will come back to, maybe they'll reopen that investigation or something, but it seems awfully dubious, doesn't it? It's constantly like when Hillary's team lies to the FBI, like Abedin and Mills did about not knowing about the server, which we could prove that they lied to the FBI because their emails show that, unlike what they told the FBI, they actually knew while Hillary was Secretary of State that she had a private server. They just get a slap in the wrist, no big deal, they're allowed to go on their way. When Trump's people like Flynn lied to the FBI or Papadopoulos, then they're charged with the crime. So it does seem to me like it's a double standard, but I don't care. Like, look, I might be a Trump supporter. My stance the entire time has been, if he's committed crimes, nail him for it. But I just want it to be enforced on all sides. I would be more than happy with Trump to go down if he committed a crime, along with people, all the other people that committed these crimes on all sides. That would be a win for this country, I think. The other thing is, like, I think if you look at it, you can see that all people, like all these groups, if you're in Washington, you're heavily involved, you probably have committed some crime. If you're a lawyer for a high-powered politician, you've probably committed some crime. So we see how in Trump's case, with people connected to him, you could go after like his lawyer, raid his lawyer in the middle of the night like Cohen, go after people connected to him and constantly try to flip them to get crimes on Trump. You would be able to do this with pretty much any politician on Washington on both sides. Yet again, nothing ever happens before this election cycle. It's just people connected to Trump that this seems to happen to. So, hey, I would be all for, let's start raiding lawyers in the middle of the night from all these politicians. Let's see what financial crimes we could dig up on them and then have them start singing like songbirds to avoid 10 years in jail. So I think it's an interesting story, but again, the important thing is going to be, we don't know who all he'll implicate, and we certainly shouldn't take his word. Regardless, if I'm on here 2 weeks from now saying, he accused Hillary and the Podesta Group of crimes, so that must be true, then I'm lying to you, because we shouldn't just take his word for that. We need evidence to back it up. So who knows, maybe he'll be able to help Mueller get to the bottom of some crimes. I hope he does, regardless of what side it comes out on, and hopefully we see more evidence publicly that shows what those are. But I do wish that this would be enforced on all sides and not just going after people connected to Trump.